Okay, so another marriageability class, uh, episode 19, removing doubt. Clearly, we need to remove doubt if we're going to be going ahead and being sure about marriage, which should last a lifetime. Can't be doubtful about it. But how do we go about doing something and being so sure about something that we can't know the future of? There's so many things that might change in our relationships and things like that. So, and generally removing doubt in your mindset. How do we do that? Well, the first thing is that you'll notice that people who are religious have less doubt. They're more sure of everything, and you can get the sense of why that is because they think there are no accidents in this world. God is controlling everything, and you just have to do what's right at the moment. So I'll just summarize that idea roughly in the verse of the Quran that I've listed um, in the usual document that I have in the description. Well, I have always have a summary document in the description, and the verse of the Quran, which I find very intriguing, is it is in the remembrance of Allah, that is the one true God, that hearts can find comfort. And that's true on many different levels. So people who just stand in nature find that they find more peace, or let's say they don't use the word peace, they say they have less depression than they get from taking any number of pharmaceutical drugs, antidepressants. So, and I would say being in nature is akin to remembering God because nature is a reflection of God. So, um, but at a different level, I want to kind of delve into why would that what has that got to do with removing doubt? What's peace got to do with doubt? And here are some of my thoughts. First of all, doubt is not the opposite of certainty. So nobody knows everything, right? So, and you might think doubt is the opposite of certainty, but I would say we don't doubt because we're not sure of all the possible things. Where we doubt because we actually have fear of something, right? It's just stupid to think that we know absolutely everything, right? Um, and particularly as a religious person, as a Muslim especially, we're constantly told throughout the Holy Quran, the guidebook for all of humanity, really, that only God is all-knowing, right, all-seeing, and all this kind of stuff. So the idea that we know everything is so ridiculous for a Muslim, anyway. So doubt is not about dealing with lack of certainty. It's actually fear in disguised. And what did I say here? You do not doubt your choice if it doesn't matter, right? So if you had a choice between one pointless thing and the other, you wouldn't have a sense of doubt. It only comes into play when you fear something's going to go wrong. And so how can you overcome fear? We've got George here. Hey, George.
Hey, sorry I'm late. I set an alarm, but it didn't go off.
What? This is unacceptable. Anyway, we're going to continue. So, George, we'll do introductions in a bit. So I'm just doing my sort of monologue here. So I'm saying doubt is not the opposite of certainty. Doubt is fear in disguise, and we can prove that when we realize that we only care about the choices or doubt a certain choice when we fear something will go wrong. Um, and so, how do you make the right choice when you don't know all the possible things that could go wrong? And for a religious person, and I would hope for well, I I'm going to come to the point where you kind of have to believe in God to overcome doubt. But for a religious person, there is no problem with doubt because all your job is to do the right thing right now. because that's all you can be expected to do by God. God doesn't expect you to do more than you're capable of. There's a verse of the Quran that says God does not, what's the word? Does not challenge or something a soul beyond its capacity. What's the word? Well, how does it go? I'm always asking Claire, the non-Muslim, to tell me, to quote the Quran back to me. Do you know the one? God does not something a soul beyond its capacity. It does not challenge a soul.
God will not burden a soul beyond its capacity.
Thank you, non-Muslim. Thank you very much. Okay, so it is, yeah. So having said that, people say, well, I don't believe in God, but actually believing God is natural and not believing God is unnatural. To say that all the us biological robots, because that's what essentially we are, right? We're just robots clothed in flesh. And flesh is really complicated when you figure out what it actually is. We didn't come into existence by accident. So it's very unnatural to think that, I don't know, this came into accident. The webcam came into existence by accident. So why should have we come into existence by accident? And then I come full circle back to this verse of the Quran. It is in the remembrance of Allah that hearts can find comfort, because when we just reflect on God again, we get into the correct frame of mind, the correct natural frame of mind that there is a God, and then we don't have to worry anymore. Like, we just have to do the right thing right now. We don't have to worry about consequences 10 years into the future, because we're not in charge. God is in charge of this very finely, well orchestrated project called life. There was another quote that I love from this. I don't know if it's just from the movie, but it's called V from Vendetta. Who's a movie fan? Like George, do you know it? Or Claire, do you know it? It's based in London.
I know the movie. Yeah, it's about Guy Fawkes.
Yeah, and he gives a lot of religious, mystical quotes, and they even have the Quran in it. And we have Stephen Fry, who hates religion, but he claims to like the Quran in the movie, which is really interesting. And there's a quote that it says, there are no accidents, there's only the illusion of accidents. I think something like that. Or coincidence, I think he said, rather than accidents. And I think people begin to realize that the more in tune they are with themselves, they're like, oh, I said this. And like they say, a lot of people begin to realize the idea of what you might call karma, good thing, what goes around comes around, and all that kind of stuff. If you do something good things eventually happen to you. And very famous entrepreneurs talk about stuff like that. Like Steve Jobs used to talk about like that. He made a famous speech about just do the right thing right now, and then when you look back, the dots will connect. I don't know if that makes any sense, but when you just, like, he did all sorts of strange things that didn't make sense at the time. Like, he went on a calligraphy course before the idea of fonts. I'm not going to go all technical and geeky, but I'm a really techie fan, right? And many years later, what happened is Apple designed fonts. Like, you might think it's obvious now, like you have different kinds of text, right? But in those days, they didn't even have that. So anyway, that's what I say. If I was going to summarize everything I said, life is easy if you realize God exists. It's not believing God exists. You don't need to believe God. God exists whether you believe it or not, right? It's just putting yourself back in that frame. And you can put yourself back in that frame of mind so quick. Just remember, contemplate God, because that's the natural thing. When we as human beings, there's a word. The word for human beings in Arabic is insan. And insan means the one who forgets. And we forget really basic things like God exists and we're going to die, stuff like that. So if we switch ourselves back into the right frame of mind, God exists, you stop worrying, and you can try it. You can do that as an experiment. You stop worrying. You just start doing. And so, I had many, I was just thinking about the choices I've got had to do today, right? It's like, oh, like I was telling Claire, should I go to Syria or not? And people are telling me I might get kidnapped and all that kind of stuff. But I kind of don't worry about anything. In fact, I fear itself, because fearing I mean, I'm not saying you should be completely insane, but fearing the unknown too much is, instead of depending on God, is what we in Islam is called associating partners with God. But anyway, I've talked a lot. There's a lot more I could say about it, I suppose. But Claire, any thoughts about what I've said so far, since you are the one who suggested this topic in the first place?
I would say that doubt is more corrosive than loss. So, um, a good example would be those people whose loved ones was on this Malaysian Airlines plane that crashed into the Indian Ocean some time ago, and I guess it's difficult for some people to believe that they must have died, or maybe they're on some you know desert island somewhere, and it is this doubt, thinking that perhaps they might be alive, that causes people not to maybe get on with their lives. But if you actually knew they were dead, you saw them die, you called the undertakers, there was a funeral, they were buried, there was probate, you got, all these things are there to give us the opportunity of coming to terms with our loss, our bereavement. But if we're not really sure, we will, maybe fancy that they might just walk in through the door as they usually did. And it is this sort of double-mindedness that causes people not to get on with their lives and achieve the closure they need to move on and do the right thing. And I find in my discussions with many people, they are double-minded. You may know that my project is to explain to people in the West in particular that their moral and legal political system is kaput and they need to find a new one. And of course, they find it very difficult. Christianity has been their religion for 2,000 years. Liberalism has been their political system for the last 250 years. And obviously, they don't want to think I'm right. And so when they
don't want
complain
to change after 2,000 years, yeah?
Yeah. So...
Yeah.
And there's this idea of the 5 stages of grief, which is anger, denial, anger, bargaining, acceptance. What was it? It's DABDA, basically. Denial,
Yeah.
anger, bargaining, acceptance, and I can't find it.
Yeah, well,
Something
all those
acceptance.
things that atheists have to deal with, right? But like a Muslim is, they run towards death often, like, in wars and stuff like that. They're like, yeah, if that's God's will, we'll do it. And if somebody dies, the typical phrase is from the Quran, to we just say, to God do we come, and to God do we return. And we just see it as, this is God's plan. That's it. And we just have to carry on doing life because God has planned stuff for us in this life. We don't get to go, oh, should we don't get to mope around, because we know we're here for a short period of time, and we're still part of the test. And this is not the end of the world. This is not the end of things. It's just the first stage, and we'll kind of, you can say, meet our relatives and all of humanity, I guess, in the next life. So yeah, we just don't mope around, we just deal with it. We know it's part of the plan.
Okay, may I finish my point though?
Oh, sorry, go on. Yeah.
Yes, so I just remembered what it was: denial, anger, bargaining, depression, acceptance. So these are the 5 stages of grief that a lot of people, are basically denying or getting angry, or you're not even thinking of bargaining, and certainly not accepting. So this is the difficulty with many people. They're double-minded. They're not sure. One day they feel everything's going to be fine. Another, next day they don't, and it's very difficult to talk to them because they are double-minded. It's yes and no, yes and no, and that will drive them crazy as well as you crazy, because it's like trying to sell a car to somebody who doesn't really, isn't really sure if you want one or not. So um and why are they like that? It's because they fear something. They fear having to accept this horrible thing that they want to reject forever. And what you spoke about faith in God is that we will feel um prepared to do what is necessary as long as we feel we're doing the right thing. But if we think, oh, maybe I shouldn't have got on this bus, maybe it's going the wrong place, I shouldn't have married this woman, I don't like the children, it's all wrong, I should have all these ideas make us depressed and despair, and sometimes kill ourselves. And so if we accept that we have to do this whether we are happy or not, whether we enjoy ourselves or not, and if we encounter difficulty, we accept it and carry on, and know that it's the right thing to do because God decreed it, or something of that nature, and that He will in the end make sure the good are rewarded and the evil are punished. And that, I think, is fundamentally what will give us ease and comfort, that we trust that God will punish with evil and reward good, either in this life or the next. And once we really believe that, then we will be prepared to do the right thing, and people will think we're wonderful people for being prepared to do the right thing because we're so principled, and everything will go well. But not if we're double-minded, because if we're double-minded, we will be cowardly and hypocritical, and people will hate us and not trust us, and that sort of thing. Yes, I have finished. Thank you.
No, that was really good. You remind me of so many other things that I didn't mention, and I'm gonna have George jump in a second. But before I forget, I used to be a lot more double-minded about a lot of things. I'd leave the house and come back in, it's like, did I leave that, whatever? And now, something more in line with the sense of something you get in the movie Star Wars. I feel a lot more at one with the Force, as it were, or at one with God. Like, I have a constant sense that, oh, I'm doing something, and then God is with me, and all sorts of weird things keep happening to make me feel like more confident in what I'm doing. And that's very much in line with the Islamic teaching, which is all you have to do is take one step towards God, and God will take 10 steps towards you. If you walk towards God, God will run towards you, not literally, but in terms of closeness, and help you in all sorts of ways. There's the quote is a lot longer, but it gives you a sense, or the quote from Prophet Muhammad is a lot longer, I should say, a sense that you just have to listen to God a little bit, and God will help you throughout your life, so you don't have to be unsure. And it's not just a mystical thing. You make an effort towards God, you experience God more and more, so you don't have much doubt in your life. That was just some experiences that you can test. Any viewers can test. If you genuinely try to listen to God, you'll find that all sorts of weird things will start happening to help you. You don't have to believe me. You can test it out like a scientific experiment. George, any thoughts about what are your thoughts about removing doubt? And then maybe you can chime in and or disagree with something I've said or Claire said.
Yeah. So I do disagree with something you've said. Now, I totally agree that with God, it removes most doubt because, as you say, God wills it. However, I don't think it's as simplistic as saying, well, it's all God's plan, it's all God's plan. I don't agree with that. I think God gave us a choice, and our choices affect the plan that God has for us. So with your way of thinking, the problem is, let's say it goes to buying a house. Oh, I'm just going to pick any house on the screen because God wills it. And then you buy a house that is about to fall over. Oh, I'm going to pick the first woman that comes across me to marry because God wills it, and she turns out to be terrible. God doesn't will these things. You have a choice in life. God, there is a God's plan, and He's always out there whispering to you that you need to listen, and He's always trying to direct you into the right place. But to go around life and just randomly, just not even have to think about your choices and just say, whatever, I'll take the first thing that comes across. I'll buy the first apples that turn out to be rotten, just because God always wills it, is not correct. That is not how God operates, in my opinion.
I
In
think
my
I think
opinion,
I
it's a
agree
balance.
with you. Maybe maybe there's a misunderstanding. So God expects you to do the right thing. So when I say take one step towards God, God takes 10 steps towards you. What does that one step look like? It's not a physical step towards God, because God is not physical in the first place. It's like doing the right thing. How do you do the right thing? According to what your conscience is telling you. So all you have to do is follow your conscience. Say, what is the conscience doing? Like, say you're talking about buying an apple. Like, do you just buy the first apple? No, your duty to God is like for the health of your own body, and maybe also supporting the right businesses by buying the right apple, for example. Like that's kind of level I think about. Like, what is the right thing to do right now? And if you keep doing the right thing, even just at a logical level, okay, good things will start happening, isn't it?
Yeah.
You just good things compound, right? But what happens when you don't believe in God? You start doing evil things. You try to do sneaky things. Yeah, you take shortcuts and things like that. And what happens is generally your life will turn out crap, and that's what happens. You know.
That I agree with. Yeah, that I agree with.
Yeah, so I like you. I'm happy for you to disagree, because sometimes there's a misunderstanding as well, and we might disagree. Actually, who knows? So Claire, any thoughts?
No, really, I think, as regards to what we choose to do, obviously, if we do, if what we do is what we think God agrees with and approves of, then we're more likely to have this spiritual comfort of thinking, well, God should support what I do because what I'm doing is good, But obviously, if you're a robber and a fraud and cheating and killing people, then you wouldn't be thinking that God supported your endeavors.
Yeah, you can't really lie to yourself. So you can say, I don't know, I'm a Muslim, for example, and then I'm robbing a bank. But then if you know you're a Muslim, you would know that God is watching you and knows your thoughts and all that kind of stuff. So it doesn't work that you can be a Muslim and do bad things and think bad things and stuff like that. Jay made an interesting comment. He said, if you are agnostic, you can ignore your conscience. Some psychologists like Viktor Frankl basically said that you can't. And I think you can't. I don't think anybody can actually ignore their conscience. And I think this is a really interesting point in our materialistic world, where we just see things as materialistic and we've lost touch with what makes us happy. We've got to, I'm not saying just believe in airy fairy stuff, random stuff, but I'm just putting forward these ideas, and then I want you to test it in your life. Like, I want you to test this idea that you can't lie to your conscience, and you can't run away from your conscience. Like, the more bad things you'll do, the more stress you'll have, the more white hairs you'll have, the more all sorts of problems you'll have. And the psychologist Viktor Frankl, he just gave a really simple solution, which is exactly what I mentioned in my opening statement. Just follow conscience at every single point. Just do what it tells you to do. He's a really famous psychologist, like on the level of Sigmund Freud. And we already agreed, George, that Sigmund Freud's a bit weirdo. He thought everything's about sex and stuff like that, right? But I'm saying, if you want to respect a psychologist, this guy is at a high level, and a lot of people respect Viktor Frankl. He basically did logotherapy, which means finding a purpose and following that purpose. You need purpose with that, and without which you can't be happy. So yeah, just follow your conscience, and you can't. It doesn't matter whether you claim not to believe in God. If you claim to be agnostic, nobody really is true. I don't know. Do I want to go there? Like, is any? I don't want. I was going to say nobody's truly agnostic, but anybody can claim to be anything, I guess. But I would say it's highly unnatural. It's highly against the grain of your mind. So it's like saying, "Oh, I don't believe that this remote was made by anybody." It's like if you say stupid things like that, it's going to be bad for your brain. You're just not going to function very well. So I don't really believe in. I don't believe people when they really when they claim to be atheists or agnostics. It's just denial is a simple word for it. Any thoughts? Jump in, anybody, anytime. Okay,
On the
George.
question of
Go on,
agnosticism,
go on.
it's true that nobody really knows whether God exists. They just act, they just decide one way or another that either God exists or he doesn't, and live their lives as if they believed it. That's the only thing
Okay,
people
let's
do.
pause. Can I put up, because I don't think you're framing it the proper way, right? Okay, the proper way to frame it is back to my remote control prop. Okay, you could say the way you just said it, Claire, was people just choose whether they believe this remote control was made by somebody or not. Okay, and agnostics just choose to not be sure. Okay, if you live your life thinking, I'm just not sure if somebody made this, yeah, that kind of way of thinking is pretty crazy. And if you think crazy throughout your whole life consistently, you're going to have really bad results. And that's what happens. And that's what I'm promoting, believing in God, because it's a reasonable, healthy thing to do. That's what I'm saying.
My theory on agnostic people, my genuine theory is they end up as trees in the next life. So they when they go to heaven and they tell God, "Oh, I couldn't make a choice," he's like, "Well, I'm gonna punish you by making you a tree, so you can live thousands of years watching other people, feeling you won't even have eyes, but you'll feel the world around you, and that's your punishment for basically being a fence sitter."
Wow, interesting. I mean, it's possible because the next life is supposed to be a very long, slow process of development, like including hell, for example. I don't think hell is permanent. That's a form of hell, I guess. Like not being fully developed. I could go with
Yeah.
that. It's a possibility. Yeah, you're not fully developed. You didn't make proper choices. So Claire, you count yourself as agnostic, and I like the thing that George said about not making choices, not committing, right? And it is totally in line with the topic of having doubt, right? And you're the one who said, Claire, so you suggested this topic, and you said it disgusts you when people are constantly doubtful and don't make choices, and you're not making a choice. You're just sitting on the fence, Claire, by being agnostic. And it's not a sensible choice because mathematically, there's zero chance God doesn't exist, but you just choose to sit on the fence. How do you feel about that?
I have to do this because I'm basically saying I'm not going to try and persuade you, because even if even an atheist understands the necessity for laws. And if we base our laws on a moral system that has been around for a while, rather than allowing our corrupt and incompetent ruling classes to make up the rules as they go along, we will be better off. And it's just a sort of logical thing. And obviously, it helps if you believe, and I've already explained the benefits of actually believing. But there are people such as Stephen J. James who thinks that people are stupid. It's like only low IQ believe in a god, and their contempt is palpable. But I'm just saying, I'm not going to argue with them. I'm just saying even an atheist knows the nature and purpose of religion. And the least your religion should be doing for you is to support marriage, and this doesn't happen in the West because they've just gone so astray from what they should be doing.
Yeah. I mean, one point I missed out, and at the end of my monologue about following your conscience, is that it's strange that following your conscience tends to be in line with religious ideals. Like your conscience won't tell you to rob anybody, It's just there's something magical about the conscience, which psychologists have kind of agreed on, that it has its own life and it seems to tell you good things. And but not only that, you might think, well, maybe your conscience is going to tell you to do something stupid, or religion's going to tell you something stupid. And what I find, I don't know if you can say amazing, but it's maybe, or just amazingly supports the truth of religion and God, religion generally, is that religious laws work. Like also weird things, like people make fun of like circumcision, and then they go, oh, that seems to reduce STDs and stuff like that. But generally, people might, I don't know, start debating that one. Okay, oh, it doesn't.
Yeah, I want to debate that one. I don't
Um,
like circumcision. I'll be circumcised. I think what would reduce STDs is a clean society. If people only had sex with their wives, we wouldn't have STDs. Circumcision isn't the solution. It's a
Sure,
panic.
but at least
It's a panic.
that's a religious value to be married, isn't it? That's a particularly religious
Yeah.
value to get married. So
I'm
let's say that's what,
anti-circumcision. I've been circumcised. The problem with circumcision is, yes, it
yeah,
reduces STDs, and yes, it's probably helped keep me clean. But on the other side of it is, it makes you less sensitive. It's getting rid of things that God gave you for your pleasure, and it's getting rid of it,
really,
which is not good.
I don't know. I have to
Yeah,
check that one up. I thought it'd be the other way
it does.
around. Right, having
No,
an
it
extra
makes you.
piece hanging around, I thought that would have ruined the pleasure I
You're
get.
more. You're more. The pleasure is better if you're not circumcised.
I have my doubts. I'm going to check that one up. But anyway,
Google it. Google it. You lose so
I'll
much.
Google it.
You
I'll
lose so
Google it.
much neurons.
Oh, okay. Yeah, we'll see. But anyway, so the point I wanted to say that I missed out right at the end, in my intro, was that it's amazing that religious ideas seem to work so well. Again, like we've experimented, isn't it? In so many different ways in this kind of last, I don't know, since the 1960s or so. With having sex outside marriage and doing anything you want, and freedom and feminism and all that kind of stuff. And then it just all goes wrong in so many different ways. Like there's this experiment, like, oh, why can't both parents go out to work? And then people do these studies and they find out there's this thing called a two-income trap, and it's so amazing. And my point, in short, is that when you realize these religious laws work so well, that also removes doubt. Like that gives you confidence. I'm just going to go with that religious law. I've tested it out. Especially if you study it. I think some people who don't study religion, like look in the psychology, look at all the data, I don't think they're as confident about their religious beliefs. But yeah, so I'm going to say, hey, I'm going to boil down my little speech there into two things. First of all, it's amazing how powerful, or how much evidence there is to support religion. Okay, I heard a quote the other day from a really cool podcast. It was something like, tradition is experiment. Oh God, tradition is an experiment that's been proved millions of times. Oh, I ruined it, but it's a really good quote. I can't remember. It's something like that. But basically, that's what it is, isn't it? But religion really is the best form of tradition that has really been proved right over and over again. But I suppose the question I want to ask, maybe, I don't know, maybe George, because you're religious. Do you think, I think there's a lot of religious people who do have doubt because they haven't really studied their religion. I feel like I've got way more, I'm way more firm in my beliefs because I've questioned it and studied it. What are your thoughts about that?
Yeah, I agree with you. I mean, sometimes I doubt enters my mind, but then I straight away snap it back out of existence. Now, someone like me, for those
But
who
is
don't
that
know me,
healthy? Is that healthy just to snap it out of existence? Shouldn't you question things
No, I do question sometimes. I've gone through a whole process of where I started to question whether God ever existed, and then I went full
I
circle
did
and came
too.
back to God. I went full circle, came back to God. So I've gone through that process before. And it is healthy to do that. You should question things. And if you do question it and investigate it properly, all roads lead back to God. All roads lead back to God. So as long as you do your questioning properly and you go full throttle, you don't just stop, you keep questioning and investigating, you will always lead back to God because all roads lead back to God. It's the only answer to all the questions we have.
Yeah. Claire, any thoughts?
I'm sorry, what was the question again?
Well, I suppose I asked George a question because you're religious, but you're not religious, so I thought it didn't make really sense to you. But I was saying like it's along the topic of doubt, like should you have doubt and things like that. And then we were saying religion gives you, you know,
You mean having
but
convictions? I
shouldn't
mean,
you
okay.
question your
I mean, I'll
religion?
tell you what I'm sure about. I'm sure that the Quran is the best available guide to humanity, and that even the most rabid Islamophobe can't undermine, because however much they hate the Quran and Muslims and Islam, they actually can't come up with a better guide.
Cool. I mean, and can you dig into that a little bit? Like, give a specific example of that your experience. Like, what? Give me a specific situation or teaching in the Quran that you find unbeatable, and other people have tried to knock and they couldn't. Something like that.
Um, well, I can only compare it to the Torah. So, it's Jews and Muslims basically saying our religion is better than yours. We don't need to think about the Christians because, that their religion is the New Testament and it doesn't say anything for sure. And Christians don't really follow the rules anyway, because there's nothing to follow in the New Testament. But we're just left with, well, which one is better? The Quran or the Torah? And it's like, well, it's obvious, isn't it? There are only very few Jews, and most Jews don't even follow their own, Torah. So, and it's too hard for them,
Practic,
obviously.
like you used to give the example of what you could be killed. There's so many ways you can suffer from capital punishment according to the Torah.
Oh,
Like it's a really
36
tough religion
capital
to follow.
offences, yes.
Yeah.
Which is kind of bloodthirsty, and anyway, the Jews don't, they can't do it unless they live in a Torah theocracy, and nobody wants a Torah theocracy. So the hypocrites, in my view. But then the Quran curses hypocrites whom it says whose final destination is hell. And so you think, oh, the 36 capital offences, I mean, that's not very nice. But then if being a hypocrite gets you into hell, that's also not very nice either, is it?
So you find this Islam is has a right balance, not too hard, not too soft, has a lot of ideas that you love that you keep repeating, like there's no compulsion religion, which apparently the what was it, the American fourth, what do they call
Yeah,
it,
the
there's
First
something.
Amendment, because
Yeah.
the Declaration of Independence, drafted by Thomas Jefferson, talks about man was created equal with inalienable rights. And you think, what rights are inalienable? Because technically the government can come and take our life, take our property, throw us into prison for no good reason. They can do that, really. So I guess the only inalienable right that nobody can take away is our right to our beliefs. So while the government can force us to say things we don't believe in, or stop us from speaking the truth, our beliefs will still be ours. I mean, we just choose to pay the price of, being cancelled by saying, things that might get us convicted for heresy, or cancelled or sued, or whatever. But we still have the privacy of our own thoughts, and that, I think, is really one of the foundations of Western civilization, such as it
Yeah,
has
and
been in the last 250 years.
And Islam had that in the Quran before, and I think Thomas Jefferson had a Quran, so maybe he was possibly influenced by the Quran. He was very interested in studying it, at least. So on one side, you said that Islam is a well-balanced religion compared to at least Judaism, and then it's quite futuristic. I mean, like well ahead of its time at least. Some of its ideas seem to be implemented in the U.S. Constitution, and there's so many other examples. Like only about 100 years ago were women given the right to inherit property. Islam already had that over 1400 years ago, stuff like that. So it is a pretty impressive religion. Is that a fair summary of the kind of stuff you were saying, Claire?
Yes, indeed, because it can be okay. I just think it's fair enough. The rules are fair enough. I mean, there are people who are going to find fault, but then they have a certain agenda, which is to reject Islam. But they are the people who are always complaining about Jews and Muslims. And you think, what do Jews have? What do Muslims have that these people who are always complaining about Jews and Muslims don't have? It's religion. And and if we're going to choose a religion, since it's so traumatic for us to change our religion, we should choose the best one available. And I guess these people are just going through the 5 stages of grief, because it's almost as if they say we can't believe that we've been wrong for all this time, and that our rulers have been lying to us for all these generations. And the thing is, yes, it is possible, when you think of the lies that we're expected to believe,
Mm.
and I think what would remove a lot of the anxiety from us in our daily life is living in a society where we can speak the truth without being cancelled. I think that's all we want, you know. And although quite a few of us, we don't want for anything, we're not starving on the streets, but you know, a lot of people's minds are the mess, because it's always yes and no. They're virtually saying it is raining and not raining in the same place at the same time every day. So it's no surprise that most Westerners are on psychotropic drugs and mentally ill.
Right. Yeah. People are mentally ill because they're suffering from, you can call it anxiety or perpetual doubt, isn't it? And that's really unhealthy. Um, I want to try to get some of the comments from our regulars here. So Jay said something interesting that I felt that I actually did in the past. I would argue and even swear at God in the past when my relationship was weaker and more doubtful. And I think maybe that's a not too unhealthy process of engaging with God, struggling with God until you have more certainty or something. I don't know, George, have you, like you said, you went through an atheist phase, I went through an atheist phase. So I don't know, how do you feel about Jay's little comment here? So I question God most days, some days I argue and scream. What are your thoughts about that?
I think Jay's trying to find his way to God, but just can't yet find that right door. I mean, if he's questioning it most days, he must know deep down there is a God. He's just struggling to find that right path back to God. And I hope you find it soon, Jay, because definitely seems like your conscience wants you to find God.
Yeah. Um, and I'm not one for insulting people, especially since I've been in the same position as you, Jay. I would put it something like, I mean, I had let's say, an experience of God that kind of essentially turned me. But if I was to summarize my main one thought that what you have to deal with is that the probability that God exists is like 99.9 forever. There's no 0% chance God does not exist, and a lot of people don't realize that. If you don't realize that, Jay, I'm happy to kind of explain that. But this is like embedded in basic science that I didn't know for a long time. It's the second law of thermodynamics, that everything falls apart naturally unless there's some sort of intelligence that puts it together. And we know that in our experience, right? You have that. Stephen Hawking, when he was still alive, he wrote a book called Brief History of Time. And in the beginning, he talked about this. He said, if you leave your house just as it is, slowly things fall apart, the plumbing goes wrong, things start leaking, whatever. That's what we call, what's it called? You know the word, Claire. What's the word when things fall apart naturally?
Wear and tear?
No, I mean the scientific word.
Entropy.
Entropy. Thank you. Claire's really good for this, right? I just, everything I forget, you, Claire, just remind me. Entropy is the nature of the universe, that things fall apart. They don't come together by themselves. So, Jay, in short, God necessarily exists because you need intelligence to make things. We know that, right? So you can't really get away from that. And like, it takes a lot of humility to accept that. And as I said, God is real, and God kind of will help you the more humble you are and allow God to show you him. Like I had an experience, I'll do it very briefly, my experience explained before. I was convinced that God did not exist, and I said, I was talking to, this is a Waterloo station, I remember it very clearly, and I said to God, I'm going to be humble for a second, and I'm going to accept that you could possibly exist. And in 0 seconds I had some sort of weird, I don't want to call it vision or something, and it was entered in my brain that it was impossible for the universe to have come into existence by accident, like impossible. And the more I studied it, it was more true. I mean, it was very true. I want to also, what was something, what was it? I like, so we've got not JJ, who, SJJ made another comment somewhere.
Yeah, yeah.
I can't remember.
Go the other way. She said she comes here for like marriage counseling or something like that.
Okay, let's just jump into this because I want to, let's debate a little bit. That's a logical fallacy. The information of solar systems doesn't negate entropy. So logical fallacy, I'm not sure if I understand his point. The formation of solar system doesn't negate. I'm not saying it doesn't negate. I'm not sure if he copy pasted that from somewhere because it didn't make any sense. I'm not trying to negate entropy. Entropy is just a fact of the universe. I'm not trying to negate it. I'm saying entropy demonstrates the fact that, you know, things fall apart by default, and we know that in our experience of life, right? Things fall apart by themselves. You need
I
intelligence
think
to make.
what SJ is trying to say is the formation of the solar system. So
Yeah.
how it came to being, how it was formed. Just because there's entropy, that doesn't negate the fact that the solar system could have formed. I think he's trying to say that you can form the solar system and have entropy at the same time, and therefore don't need a god to create to keep things together. Because he thinks the solar system can just come together by itself through the Big Bang, even if entropy exists, which I disagree, and I'm with you on this, Khaled.
Okay, so I mean, let's keep the interesting discussion going. He said, "How do crystals grow?" Okay, so what I think he's suggesting, okay, crystals are order out of chaos, right? Okay, so he is claiming that crystals are forming intelligent sort of patterns, and we've got Putra. I'm not sure who Putra is. We'll have Putra on in a sec. Oh, maybe that's my Indonesian friend. Um, who's Putra? It must be my Indonesian friend. You can jump in if you like, but that's not his name. Normally it's Lutfi, but anyway, let me just make it bigger so I can see more stuff. But anyway, so I think SJJ is claiming that, he is saying there's order out of chaos, right? So that's the idea behind that, is that things are happening randomly and it's not part of nature. That's not right, is it? Like, if crystals are forming, are they? How do you know they're being formed randomly? We don't. I'm not sure what the true nature of crystals are. Right? Are they okay? They might be making a pattern. Are they? If they are growing randomly, just say they are, right? Are they making anything intelligent? But generally, are we just crystals? Are we just being are we, did our complicated eyes, which are essentially cameras, just formed randomly? Because if that was random, they could have, we could have just grown all sorts of neurons in the wrong direction and we wouldn't get a camera. Like, it doesn't make any sense from a normal experience of life that random
I think
create anything. It doesn't make any sense.
SJJ's misinterpreting a simple pattern like crystals compared to a complex pattern like a living organism.
I think
Simple
that's a
patterns can be formed through randomness. Complex patterns cannot be formed by randomness. They need intelligent design. They need someone to have kicked off the intelligent design. That's why scientists can't recreate life.
That's absolutely right. They can't create life. All this time they've been claiming that it's possible, but they haven't managed to do it. That's true. They can mess with life. They can change genes and stuff like that, and probably mess things up as well. So SJJ is, this is essentially where, SJJ is hanging on to a very important part of the debate, which is you can't, and this is what we started off with, you can't have or get removed doubt unless you believe in God. So the debate goes to, how do we know God exists? You can do simple maths, right? To make the smallest drop of blood, for example. So people might not realize blood is really, really complicated. Okay. It efficiently moves oxygen around the body and does all sorts of crazy things, right? And a tiny part of that is called hemoglobin, and that hemoglobin is made up of about 400 enzymes, and enzymes themselves, as I remember, they're like Lego. They're made out of 20 pieces and they have to be they have to make those 20 pieces have to be in exact order, right? So simple maths, you have to do 20 times 20 times 20, 400 times. That number, for it to be made, to make a simple hemoglobin, and just to get an idea, to make if you need, I think, 5 million or something of them just to make a drop of blood, and a tiny drop of blood, like in the end of a pinhead, not even a big drop of blood, right? Okay, that is the impossibility of making one of those is so impossible. It's 1 over 10 to the power of 700. I'm not going to confuse you with lots of big numbers. Just to put it in context, the number of atoms in the universe is only 10 to the power of 50. Like, it's a ton. No, it's not you. Like, in short, if you had random mutations every millisecond since the beginning of the universe, you wouldn't even get a drop of blood. You wouldn't even get a fraction of a drop of blood, right? It's that impossible. People don't realize, okay? So to think that, you can have one mistake and it'll lead to another, you can have one mistake on top of the other and then you would get something intelligent. That's not scientific. Absolutely not scientific. I don't know how I could explain it in different ways, I guess, SJJ. Press 1 if the chat is more interested in the stream and stuff like that. Okay. But anyway, what did you, Claire, you often say you don't like to hear numbers and stuff like that. If I was to summarize to say, that is, I was just trying to demonstrate that drop of blood is so impossible to make. You would have taken longer than the length of the universe to make. Is that confusing? Did that have any impact on your thoughts, Claire?
Well, I agree with you. It's very complex, and well, the the human body and even an animal is, well, a work of biological wonder, if you want to break it down. But you have the problem of people just refusing to believe it and saying it's evolution over, hundreds and thousands of billions of years. People became like that because they evolved in that way. But I think if you demonstrate the social and political purposes of religion, you'll see the logic of it. I don't think people adopt a religion for the fun of it. They do it to protect themselves and keep themselves in existence and frighten their young people into marrying. And that, I think, remains necessary, as we know from the very low birth rates of the West.
And that's just more evidence of the existence of God, that these religious laws are keeping religious lineages or families alive, and non-religious people are dying out. So it's like, if you can prove God's existence scientifically, just logically and mathematically, or you can prove God's existence through God's teachings. So like, so many different things that are proving God's existence directly and indirectly in so many ways. And
Well,
I
the
think,
Jews
yeah,
in particular
um,
are kind of significant because everybody complains about them, right? And it's like, a lot of people think it's the God of the Jews kind of thing, which makes them think that Jews survive because of whom they worship, and also because of their religion, and also Christianity takes some features of Judaism, and so does Islam. So some people who don't like Jews and who want to reject the whole thing say that Christianity and Islam are Jewish religions. But that their whole obsession about Jews is kind of almost evidence of the power of having a religion.
we're going to try to finish on time. I'm just going to have a last thought. Since I love SJJ's input, maybe you should join on camera next time. That'd be good. And you can even pick a topic, SJJ, in the live comments. But just to add, you've been fed an idea that it was life was accidental, which is counterintuitive, counter any logic of your own any experience that you've had in life. Like, you've never seen a watch be made by itself, and then you're trying to project that idea into the way you see a seed. A seed is a complex thing, and it turned into a flower. That just makes the seed more complex. It's not evidence of the lack of God at all. It's just like, that's frigging amazing, right? It doesn't disprove God in the slightest. Just have to think things the right way around. There's no reason to disbelieve in God. Anyway, thank you very much. I promise, George, we're going to stop in time. Let's do it. Thank you very much, everybody. Appreciate
Thank
it.
you, everyone. Have a good
You too.
day.
You
God
too.
Thanks
bless.
for having me.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Take care.